Awesome, everybody. So we're super excited to be here today. Hi to everyone and welcome to this Growth Tribe webinar. I hope you're excited as well. Yeah. So just about the questions, this is a tool called Livestorm. You can go ahead and ask questions. You should see a questions tab next to the chats tab. If possible, don't ask questions in the chat tab because we might miss them. We do have the team over here. You can say hi to Yob and Julia. I don't know if you can see them. So they're going to check your sort of questions along the way, and they'll just sort of make a list of questions, which we'll share, which we'll try to answer in the end. I might go over time actually because of the 8-minute delay. So let me just go back in. We're actually going to get started. I'm going to share the screen. Up. All right. Can everybody see? Is this working correctly? You guys can see the. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. You see my face as well? Oh, okay. So I got to be careful with the faces I make. So thanks for being here. I'm actually the one speaking today, but I'd like to also I mean, this webinar is like a accumulation of a lot of the learnings that we've had actually as a team. So I just want to thank the team also for contributing. I'm the one speaking, but it's an accumulation of everything we've been working on together for the past 2 years. We're a little bit more at the moment. We're currently at 34 and sort of growing quite fast. And everyone sort of contributed to the learnings that I'm going to be sharing here. So yeah. This is what we're going to cover during the, oh, by the way, we're hiring. So if you want to join the team, go ahead and click that link down there. We've got about 10, 11 or 12 positions open at the moment in Amsterdam and in London. This is what we're going to cover during the webinar. So this is actually a little bit different to what I usually do, because usually we share a lot of tactics. And here I've called it, so I've called this talk, How to Implement a Growth Process. And the subtitle I gave it was sort of process, rituals, frameworks, and mental models. It's different to what we normally do because we usually go a lot into actual tactics, actual growth tactics, best practices, et cetera, et cetera. Here, we're actually going to dive more into what we've learned after training about 800 companies, but more on the process of implementing a growth team or a growth person or a growth process within the company. We're training currently like 400 people a month at Growth Tribe from startups and scale-ups and corporates. So I've tried to accumulate all of these learnings into sort of a one hour talk. I'll try to keep it as fast as possible because I know people get bored really easily during webinars. And then you can sort of pause it later on when you have the recording, when you find something interesting, and you can ask questions. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn, or I'll give you the access to Timon and Sabina, who will be available for you guys on LinkedIn if you have sort of extra questions. If you're interested in the tactics, just follow us on YouTube. We share a lot of tactics in there, especially in the Growth Insights. So like I said, I'm not going to be doing too many tools and tactics in this talk. It's going to be more about process, a little about mental models, about mindset, because it's just something we haven't done before. And we've seen a lot of fake stuff out there from people who have a very good theory of how to implement growth within an organization, but haven't actually done it themselves. There's some really legitimate sources like the Skyscanner blog, etc., but a lot of consultants that are sharing learnings from a very theoretical point of view that are then very difficult to implement actually in the organization. And that's what I want to talk about today. Cool, so we're actually going to start with the mindset change. As stated here, some of you will need this. Some of you will not need this. Some of you already have this sort of growth mindset, this experimentation mindset within your organization or within your own brain. And some of you don't have it. If you already have it, maybe use some of the use cases I'll show you or some of the quotes I'll show you to try to brainwash other people within the organization to manage your stakeholders. And if you've already got it, it's just a sort of a refresher. And if this is not the case yet, then I hope it'll be interesting for you. So we usually start with what we call the growth marketing pyramid, which is basically the pyramid that we use to transform people and organizations. It looks very consultative-y, but it's sort of a nice framework that we can actually use. And we usually start with the mindset at the top. We actually start at the top of the pyramid, and it might sound like an empty cliche, but we love the quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Really having a culture and the right mindset of rapid experimentation has proven to be very effective in the teams that we've trained so far. And this is what I'll describe in the next hour through a bunch of use cases. The mindset's important because It embodies sort of the culture within the organization. Do I have liberty to run experiments? Do we have this data-driven approach? To sort of justify the need for this mindset, I usually, one of our favorite examples, I would say, if not our favorite, we have a big poster of this in the office, is to cite Jeff Bezos, basically, who we've been following for years now, before, he was the richest man in the world and before there was so much hype around him. And one of my favorite business books is actually reading his yearly letters to shareholders. I've included a link down here, which you can follow. Bezos allocates a lot of Amazon's success to the number of experiments that they run per month, per year, per week, and per day. And I really like the fact that he says that being wrong will hurt you, but being slow will absolutely kill you. The risk of a false positive is not that big compared to the risk of actually being slow. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. Amazon isn't the only one. Look at how many experiments these fast-moving companies are running per day, per week, per month. And more locally, we're in the Netherlands currently, but our, fast-growing company, our neighbors, Booking.com, same thing. They have this sort of this attitude of rapid experimentation. And I'll give you some B2B and some B2C examples later of companies that have been able to achieve this. And I'll have some specific use cases, but I did want to stick to profit quite a lot. I just want to prove that speed and experimentation wins. It's not just about speed and experimentation, it's also about being data-driven, so sort of following the customer end-to-end on the journey. I think this has become pretty common now. We've understood the importance of tracking customers, with their consent, of course, but tracking customers to be able to validate or invalidate experiments and measure the impact of what you're doing. Our most valuable resource is time, and by tracking customers and tracking experiments is the only way that we can actually find out what's working and what's not working in order to focus more on what actually works. This, by the way, is traditionally what's been the big difference between some marketing teams that we've seen as opposed to what we try to evangelize, which is growth teams, which are teams that actually follow the customer throughout the entire data-driven journey and try to optimize the places where we're losing customers and revenue and money. Although we've seen some marketing teams switching to this data-driven approach. I think just from looking at the attendees for this webinar, there's a lot of different profiles in the room, a lot of different industries, a lot of different business models, but there's also a lot of difference between what we call experimentation natives versus catch-up companies. Experimentation natives are typically companies that have been running experimentation since day one. They've set up the infrastructure since day one. They've had this mentality of experimentation since day one. Companies like Skyscanner or Intuit or HelloPrint or Booking.com, companies that really love experimentation versus companies that are playing catch-up. And I didn't want to name any because I didn't want to do any name calling, but companies that are trying to embed experimentation within the organization, not for new products, but actually for optimization now that they've all got all of this sort of legacy processes in there. And for these companies, we call it sort of system override, trying to override the existing system because there's something that's not working with it. It's not helping to experiment faster. This is the traditional journey of teams that try to do system override or that try to start with experimentation within the company, that try to start with building a growth team. This is actually an average of about 200 companies who we've sort of, it's not 200, it's a little bit less. I think it was like 150 or 155. I need to check the Excel sheet again. This is the average of sort of what happens with their experiments over time. So you've got the return on investment of experiments over here, and then you've got each individual experiment they run. And usually we see that the first experiments that a team runs are usually inconclusive or failed. They're mostly inconclusive because the tracking isn't set up correctly. Then we start to get better at it over here. And then what people call the growth hack, the big growth tactic, the one that really improves your ROI, the big lead generation tactic, the big conversion rate optimization tactic, the holy shit moment happens after a while. And it happens, we try to make this happen as early as possible within the journey of this experimentation because it just makes it harder to run more experiments afterwards. You then get approval to take more risks, and once you get approval to take more risks, you can take more risks. The fails are bigger, but the wins are bigger. And what we used to be obsessed with growth hacks or growth tactics, now we're actually obsessed for the past year and a half with the actual process because it's the incremental growth of all of these small experiments that actually helps on the long run. And I'm going to try to show you some of the models and the tactics to actually reach this incremental growth by experimenting more than we can. I'm supposed to be an expert. You know, I've been doing this for 14 years of trying to build businesses online, a little bit less, like 13 years, and I still get only like 1 out of 2 experiments right, even maybe 1 out of 3. And I really believe, you know, we used to focus on quality over quantity. I agree to focus on the quantity as well, but just in the end, the quality as well, but in the end, quantity just seems to win. And there's always a little bit of quality in your experiments. You're not just going to do random stuff. So I used to evangelize quality. Now I'm back to evangelizing quantity. I just can't make sense of it in my own brain. It's quite a polemic thing within the growth world, actually. Is it quality or quantity? By the way, what we're going to share is applicable for all of the sort of companies we've been training. So I like to separate companies on this matrix for growth with size of the company here on the x-axis, and whether the company is very regulated, both internally and externally, whether the mindset's there, whether legal compliance and risk departments are big, whether you have a lot of stakeholders. And what we see is that I'll show you tactics. So these are some of the companies that we've trained and for which the process has actually worked. So for some of these companies, it's like the team was really small, or it was 1 or 2 people, and other companies, it was actually a whole team. And you can, I think what's interesting here is that we used to think this was only applicable for scale-ups or startups, but we've been able to start applying it within larger organizations and highly regulated organizations as well. The answer is just having a bit of common sense and using some of the blocker removal tactics that I'm going to share with you a little bit later in the presentation. So that was it about the mindset. If you need more about the mindset to brainwash other people or to understand it better, jump on our YouTube channel. We share a lot of information about it. The process. Also, we've shared quite some information in the past about this. It's a process that we've been fine-tuning for the past, I think it's 2 years now. And it's the process of rapid experimentation. It's not really lean startup in the sense that we're not only trying to innovate with new business models, and we're not just trying to remove risky assumptions. It's a little bit different process because it takes into account a validated product or a validated problem solution fit. And then it's much more about optimizing existing products. If you want more details about the process, go to this link over here. There's a YouTube video. It's a bit old. The filming is not as great as what we do now, but it still shows you the process step by step. I'll cover the process a little bit here, and I'll give you some tips within that process if it's a process that you want to implement. And now I'll stop saying the word process because that's been a lot. The prerequisites for running what we call GROWS, the GROWS process, I said it again, is to have a clear value proposition that's been validated, to have a business model that's been validated, let's say 50, 60%. If you're still in the customer discovery phase, this doesn't really work. It's much more for validation testing once you actually have some sort of product or prototype available and you want to start validation testing. So I would say that you would need a 50, 60% validated business model, that you understand who your segments or your personas or which tribes you're trying to target are, so you do know whose pain you actually want to solve. And this is where you begin to reach product market fit, or you've reached sort of 95% of product market fit. Product market fit moves all the time. You never have 100% product market fit because external factors come into play. So we usually say 95% product market fit. You understand your customer journey with what we call the pirate funnel. So understanding what you should be tracking in that customer journey to be data driven. And you've defined an OMTM, a one metric that matters more than every other metric. What's that metric for you right now? Then we run into sort of this iterative loop of experimentation. And, you know, this comes from the world of lean startup. It comes from the world of conversion rate optimization. It comes from the world of science. It comes from the scientific method. And the more we look at it, the more we say this just comes from the world of common sense. It's a sensical way of trying to grow businesses and products by trying to gather ideas and test stuff as soon as possible, mostly to reduce the risk of implementation. We're really trying to reduce the risk of our endeavors. The process works like this. We use internal and external qualitative and quantitative data to come up with ideas. We use what we have. Larger organizations have much stronger business intelligence. They tend to have a lot more strong quantitative data. A little bit smaller startups or smaller teams starting with a new product, maybe they need to use external quantitative data. So you basically use what you have, and then we try to create a backlog of experiments. Developers use a backlog of features. They have a feature backlog. In growth, we have an experimentation backlog. We use this so much that we actually built our own app. Actually, Jim built this. So this is an app that allows us to track a backlog of experiments, work on experiments, and then actually execute those experiments and manage the learnings. This is how many experiments are sort of put into our Grows app on a weekly basis. We've worked with quite some companies now, and the numbers are between 10 and 100. So we've seen teams that are putting 10 per week and others that are putting 100 per week. The great thing here is that you don't bother your colleague with this great idea you have. You put it in the backlog, and then we take care of it a little bit later in the second phase, which is the ranking phase. Now, this is something Julia and Job have been working on. It's sort of a matrix of what to focus on first. And here I'll give you some examples. So stuff that has high impact and low effort, we call those the quick wins. High impact, high effort, we call those like the big ass projects without the ass. Low effort, low impact, we call it sort of fill-in jobs. And the high effort, low impact, we call it thankless tasks, which is a great way of saying stuff we shouldn't be working on. The main problem here is, how do you know what's going to have a big impact? It's actually a lot of sort of guesstimating and a lot of intuition. I'll give you some examples of quick wins. So this is a company called AppSignal. They do error tracking for websites that are built on Ruby or on Elixir, and they're targeting developers. Really hard to target developers with marketing material they don't want to be marketed to. So they had the great idea of actually targeting developers with errors that developers came up with when they were coding. So on AdWords, they would try to rank for typical errors that developers were ranking for. And then, so very cheap because nobody else was fighting for those keywords. And when you would click on it, it would then direct you to a landing page with a, I think it was with a solution for that error. So you're actually giving value to the developer. And by the way, had you used AppSignal, you wouldn't have gotten this type of error. So getting the person really at the right moment when there was a desire and a need for the specific product. Another quick win is, for example, using LinkedIn at the moment. LinkedIn's algorithm is like taking candy from a baby. It's really easy to get organic reach on LinkedIn at the moment. So it's understanding how the LinkedIn algorithm works and trying to game it to always be at the top of people's feed, unlike Facebook, which is extremely difficult to get organic reach on at the moment. Small quick wins. This is also a great one from HelloPrint. This is a team that we trained back in the academy. Their quick win was, in order to improve conversions on a product page, they got rid of stuff that was distracting, removing distractions. So it wasn't building new stuff, it was getting rid of stuff, which had a really nice, almost 1/3 increase uplift on conversions. So we're always looking for these low effort, high impact experiments to run. Oh, this is another one that we were doing. This was with a fast-moving consumer good company. And the quick win was understanding, should we listen to the designers with their great new olive oil bottle, or should we stick to the more traditional olive oil bottle and just pimp that olive oil bottle? And it was causing tons and tons and tons of discussions. And by running some small usability tests online, we were already being able to de-risk which bottle will actually be preferred. And we used to think that this was only possible online, but actually with some nice mock-ups, it's possible to do this sort of in-aisle testing from home, from your office in a matter of 20 minutes. It's not 100% reliable data, but we say that it's like 60 or 70% reliable data. It adds data to the actual product that you're trying to launch. Then there's big projects. Fantastic big project that came out of our 6-week evening course is from Rick de Vette from Eneco. And this took a little bit more time, but what they were trying to do is they were trying to sell more car loaders for electric cars that you can put in your house. And it was kind of a difficult product to sell because you need to educate around that product, and people didn't really understand how much it cost. And within a larger organization like Eneco, this happens to be one of the biggest energy providers in the Netherlands. You know, it's a much more traditional organization. It's harder to run these types of experiments, but with the right mindset, the right grit, they were able to actually run a questionnaire that was also sort of gamified to understand how much it would cost for you to install a loader inside your house. And I think the results were fantastic from this. They were expecting 200 leads, and within the first 6 weeks, they were able to generate 1,100 leads and generate 50 sales, which was traditionally within that organization would have taken a lot longer. Rick is now the head of experimentation within Eneco. He's like the internal, he's the first person within Eneco to have the badge of growth hacker within this large organization. So we're creating new job titles within large corporates. I really get chills when I think of these use cases. I'm just dumping you with a bunch of random sort of experiments that have been running. Big projects, SEO, or trying to dominate YouTube. You know, we've been trying to dominate YouTube for the past year, and now we're ranking for keywords which we would never have ranked for on typical traditional SEO because they were so, the competition there was really difficult. This was an example of a big project. Example of a big project is redoing your whole onboarding, for example. So high impact, but also high effort. And then I'll show you how to run these experiments, how to lay them across time and within your sprints. This is also one of my favorite use cases. This is from Max, who was an account manager at Mr. Green. It's a electric car leasing company. He came to our 6-week evening course and he decided he wanted to build a self-service platform for people to be able to actually choose their car and customize their car directly online. He built a small prototype of it, and then he proved that he could generate leads himself without any developers by using a simple tool, and then it was actually coded into the website. 800% increase in leads, and now they've actually created a whole new business model out of it called Mr. Green Direct, which is a fully self-service model. Once again, big project, takes a little bit longer. I don't know. This is cookie cutter approach. This is how Julia and Job, who have been working on this, think that you should sort of disperse your experiments over time within sprints. So here I'm putting monthly sprints. I don't know if you run weekly sprints or bi-weekly sprints or monthly sprints, and you want to have a continuous arrival of low effort, high impact experiments across time, your quick wins. You want to run a lot of these big projects simultaneously as well. You don't have to follow this exactly, but that's the idea. You want to be seeding these bigger impact projects and at the same time continuously frequently running these quick wins on the side. This doesn't apply to every organization. This is why we do training. So we have a bunch of different trainings to actually show you how to run these experiments. I'll talk about that a little bit later. What's interesting though is we found, it's not the exact number, but we found that actual growth marketing or growth hacking or having a growth team isn't a fit for 100% of companies. It's a fit for about 80, I can't remember the exact number, but it was something like 80-20. So I just used the 80-20. We found that for 4 companies out of 5, it's definitely a good fit. They can actually start running experimentation. For 1 out of 5, it's not. For some reasons I'll go into later. If you guys want to find out whether growth is a fit for your organization, I didn't want to go through the details of this in this webinar because I wanted to share some more interesting stuff. You can actually have a call with Sabina or with Timon, who are used to answering this question, and they'll ask you like 6 or 7 questions. And based on these questions that they ask you, they'll find out whether it could be a fit for your size of the organization, for the length of your sales cycle, and for what type of product you actually sell. Cool. So after gathering ideas, based on, you know, maybe you got some ideas from some stuff I've shown you right now, we're going to rank those ideas. This is very important for stakeholder management. We try to have as many people in the room as possible to rank those ideas. Try to get the stakeholders who might be blockers to your experiments in the room to rank it with you. If they get to vote on experiments, then those experiments will go much more smoothly. And we try to get the wisdom of the crowds, as many different types of brain in the room as possible. Here we have a UXer, a data scientist, marketing automation expert, content marketeer, video specialist, and a developer. Get all of those brains in the room to rank those ideas. We rank those ideas based on frameworks that are like semi-scientific frameworks. You can see those in the video that I shared earlier on about the growth process. It would take too long to go in the actual details, but it's all about how big of an impact will this experiment have, how easy is it to run this experiment, and is it scalable? Then we usually pick out the top 3 or 4 winners from the ranking, and we usually also pick out what we call Takeru Kobayashi experiments, crazy ideas that are at the bottom of the ranking. Then we outline experiments. So this we really stole from the lean startup movement. We try to build experiments that are measurable, that are tracked correctly. And we also, so this is all integrated within this growth tool that we use, but you can find a lot of frameworks for this online. We believe that 90% of experiments should be run within 2 weeks maximum. 90% of experiments, it should be possible to run them within 2 weeks. Why? Well, because 2 weeks represents about 4% of a year, and that's a lot of time, and we need to run as many experiments as possible. If your experiment lasts longer than 2 weeks, then it's either part of the 10%, or you need to cut that stuff down and turn it into smaller experiments. Work, execute, get shit done. That's about knowing how to actually execute within your organization. This is how we plan our experiments. So we really advise you to work, use a Kanban way of working, where experiments that are being planned, the ones that are currently active, and the ones that are currently being analyzed. Some of the teams we've trained, we've seen anywhere between 10 to 30 active experiments at the same time. And there tends to be a lot of experiments in the analysis phase because it's really important, but it's kind of boring to analyze experiments, especially the failed ones, like why did this experiment fail? Although it's probably the most important thing. So there usually needs to be a good growth PM to push people to actually analyze the experiments. This is actually quite important. Feels gimmicky, but it works well. We have this in our organization. We've seen other companies sort of do similar versions of it. They actually this team made a much nicer version of our poster. They added a success board as well. This is what we call the fail board. And every time we have a failed experiment, we write it up on the board. And after sort of 10 failed experiments, we have a little party. It's not always a cocktail party. Last time we had a sushi party, and it was funny because we got sick from the sushi. So that was kind of a fail in itself. And we have the fail of the month over here. And this month, I'm the fail of the month. I ran an experiment. I stopped the whole company for a morning because I was sure my idea was going to work because I'm such an expert. And I forced everybody to start. I really motivated everybody to start working on a live chat experiment. And it was a big fail. It didn't work at all. So I'm currently the fail of the month. And I think for new people starting within the organization, we're hiring like 5, 6, 7 new people per month at the moment. When they come into the organization and they see that the fail of the month is one of the co-founders, and they see her face or his face on there with their name, it really tells them, okay, this is an organization where it's okay to make mistakes on running experiments. I also really like what Jeroen over here did. They've implemented the fail board as well, and they created a success board. Maybe they're a little bit more positive people than we are. So they actually also put Post-its when they've actually got successes and they're allowed to have a party. We should do that too, actually. We should put up a success board. I think we should do it. Anyway. So this is good also for switching the mindset. And then we would study the data. You want to study data from your experiments to identify what's a win versus what's a fail or what's inconclusive. This is probably one of the best onboarding documents that we have. When we onboard people at Growth Tribe, we have a 1 week, actually it's a 2-week training onboarding bootcamp so that we can reduce the time to productivity of new colleagues to as short as possible. And we have a lot of beautiful presentations and training and stuff. But this shows you every single experiment that we've been running over the past year, year and a half. To see what's been a success, what hasn't been a success. We don't tell people they're not allowed to rerun the same experiment. We have a little bit the booking.com style, that it's okay to rerun an experiment that's already been run, but they get to see what's been done, what's worked, what hasn't worked. Beautiful onboarding to see where the company is at, what they've tried, what they haven't tried. So then after you analyze an experiment, compare with the different scenarios that you had. For the wins, we create playbooks and we try to double down on it. We've actually got a sort of a growth department that stands outside of the other departments, and they experiment a lot. And when they've got wins, they feed it into the different departments, whether it's the sales department, the innovation department, the marketing department, the HR department, whatever they're trying to experiment for, so that then that department doubles down on it. When it's a fail, we try to find out why it didn't work, get the learnings, and then we insert all of the data into the knowledge Bible that we have. So I'll talk about organizational structures later. Some other organizational structures, every team within the company is a growth team. You don't have like growth and you don't have a marketing department. Everything is growth. I'll talk about that later. However, what we do when we have a win is that we create one of these. It takes a bit of time, but it's a beautiful document internally to find out what the growth team is actually doing and what are the best practices we should follow. I think this is one of the main reasons why we've grown so fast, is by creating these growth playbooks. And everybody learns how to use the playbooks so that every then department can actually be independent in running whatever these playbooks are. So if I could give you one tip here, is to really, I'm sure a lot of you have heard this before, document the learnings and turn it into playbooks. I know it takes time. Do it on the weekend because your weeks are so busy, or do it in the evening. Take 2 hours in the morning to do it. This is a huge leverage for growth and for education and for evangelizing growth within the organization. And another small tip, make it pretty. If it's just an A4 and it's just a bunch of text, people won't read it. Try to make it as pretty as possible and as engaging as possible. It's just like marketing. You got to get people's attention, and you got to create a delightful experience. So these are some examples of teams we've trained recently who went through our 3-month program. There's a very limited amount of teams that actually are accepted to go through a 3-month program. This is how many experiments they're able to run in 11 sprints, so in 11 weeks. And this is just to show you some of this was the success rate of this team. This was for a B2C subscription food e-commerce company. 25% of experiments were actually a win. This was for a B2C subscription fashion company. 20% of their experiments were successful. This was for transactional company. Wait, I think I made a mistake here. 15 wins, 36 ongoing. No, that's about correct. This was more B2C and B2B transactional. They ran 27 experiments and they had 20%. So you're starting to see this sort of trend there. I think when you're starting off, about 30% of your experiments will actually be successful, 20 to 30%, unless you're really good at analyzing the data and you've got really strong CRM data and you're really good at sort of running business intelligence. And there, in this example, this company, it's a B2B transactional company, 41% of their experiments were wins in those first 11 weeks. They were just really much better at coming up with the right qualitative research and quantitative research on what they believed would be a successful experiment. This was for a B2B wealth management organization from one of the largest pension funds here in the Netherlands. This was their journey. They started out with 0 experiments, then they were doing 3 experiments per bi-weekly period, then 7, 6, and then they got up to 14. And about 27%, well, it was exactly 27% success rate. By the way, very traditional organization. So it's possible to do this with the right context in very traditional organizations as well. Now, what are the blockers if you want to implement this within your company? You might think, and I thought this too for a long time as well, that it's actually easier to implement this within a startup versus a corporate. Actually, it's not the case. It should be easier, but the same blockers actually come our way when we're in a startup rather than in a corporation. And it's sometimes actually easier to get this to be successful in a corporate. And yeah, I can tell you this with quite some assurance because we've done about 500 or 600 of these cases. So what we try to do is we try to build growth teams, growth individuals, and then growth teams that have a very strong understanding of creative marketing, tooling and automation. This used to say coding and automation, but there's so many tools out there now that we call it tooling and automation. Behavioral psychology, how the human brain works. A marketeer is a psychologist after all. And data and testing, understanding how to read the data, what to read from the data, and how to run experiments. But basically, in a simpler way, we're trying to make teams and individuals more self-reliant so that they can actually run more experiments. They don't depend on different stakeholders or on external parties. So what does it mean to run experiments within an organization? And this is not just for larger corporates. So we've actually separated it into the supporting roles, the immune system, and then the blockers. The supporting roles, and then I'll tell you how to fix these. The supporting roles that we see are things like sales, IT, data officers who govern the data, have access to the data, art direction, designers, customer care, existing optimizers, existing conversion rate optimizers, existing heads of innovation, HR, and there's probably some examples that are more relevant to your specific case. Then there's what we call the immune system. Some people call these the blockers. I hate calling these the blockers because the immune system is trying to protect the company from getting sick. Experimentation can be seen as a virus within an organization because they're doing system override. They're trying to override the system and do things differently. And the immune system is trying to keep that organization away from an infection. So usually that's branding, not hurting the long-term value of the company. Immune system is also legal. Don't do anything that could mislead the customer or cause us legal issues. Compliance and governance. This is the way that we want to govern the organization. These are the internal rules. Or things like procurement. We don't have access to a credit card. It's not possible for you to use this tool. And you've probably got some specific cases. By the way, if you've got anything that are supporting roles within your company or immune system within your company, could you please put them in the chat so that maybe we can enrich this slide and we can learn from this. If I've forgotten anything, I've got a longer list, but I wanted to see if you maybe had some specific use cases yourselves. And then we have the hurdles. I don't call it blockers because blockers is too sort of negative, but it's the hurdles. And the biggest hurdle, one of the biggest hurdles we've seen is the C-level mindset. Big egos, your data's right, but I don't care because, you know, I'm right. I don't care what the data says, and you can always find reasons why you shouldn't listen to the data. I'm reading the data differently, or you're wrong with the data. The experiment wasn't carried out right. This is hurting the long-term the long-term growth of the company. Execution skills, as you'll see in the next slide, this is actually the biggest one that we've seen. Agencies, we have nothing against agencies. However, sometimes it's like outsourcing your thinking or outsourcing your tone of voice and outsourcing your experimentation. We've seen that experimentation and growth is such an integral part of the success of businesses and products. It should be internalized. Stop externalizing your growth. And then finally, missing data, not having access to the data not being clean. So we've done this sort of weighted average of where we see that the biggest skills are, and usually it's on C-level mindset, big egos, and execution skills. Having to depend on other parties because you don't know how to play with the data, you don't know how to create your prototypes, you don't know how to build that landing page yourself, you don't know how to generate that traffic yourself, you don't know what the cognitive biases of human beings are to actually run those experiments yourself. And that goes really through sort of having a growth mindset and trying to learn these skills yourselves. And I'll go through the details of the T-shaped player in a little bit. So when you run experiments, with regards to supporting roles, here's like the 4 or 5 best tips I can give you. First of all, present yourself as an internal experimentation agency. Be humble and spin it as an opportunity for them. Don't come in as the big growth hacker, growth marketeer that's super genius. You have this great new function and you're going to solve everything. Present yourself as an opportunity for these different departments to actually run experiments on your back and try to get them involved in the experimentation process. What should we test on? What do you think a good experiment is? Try to position yourself. Understand the financial implications of experiments. Can't stress this one enough. Try to come up with what are the financial scenarios of actually running the experiments. What is the impact on the bottom line? What is the financial implication for the organization? Sit down with somebody from finance. This is my greatest learning this last year. Actually sitting down with someone from finance when running an experiment so that you can see, will this have a big financial impact on the organization? If it does, then it's great for evangelizing your way of working within the organization. Get wins as early as possible. Test the stuff that matters, which is really linked to the previous point as work. Don't test the small stuff where everyone will sort of disregard the experiment. Try to test the stuff that will have the biggest impact. Just try to test stuff that has a meaningful impact, which means, what does this mean? Either it's an important product for the roadmap, or it's a high impact linked to revenue, or it has a high impact on whatever the big important metrics of the roadmap are at any given moment. Find out what the roadmap of the company is and try to run experiments on areas that are linked to the current roadmap. Present bi-weekly or monthly demos to show your progress. We've done this a lot of larger organizations. It's just having this live open session for everybody in the organization to join where you demo what experiment you've actually been running. And then this one, share and document your experiments. We've integrated our Grows app to Slack. So the app I was showing you before, we have a direct message on Slack that shows up every time an experiment has been analyzed to show the results. Maybe it's just building an A4 on some design tool online and that you share within the organization. Maybe it's making a small video. So you make a small video on QuickTime and then you upload it to YouTube unlisted and you share it with the rest of the organization. Show people what you're doing, what you're up to. And then get them involved in the voting. This is a really good one. When you're trying to vote your experiments or brainstorming experiments, try to get the different parties who might be blockers or you might need their support, get them involved in that process as early as possible. Immune system, I'd like to say involve them as early as possible as well. What we found works really well is to present them with the scenarios of possible experiments that we might want to run, especially for legal compliance and branding. Show them some scenarios of experiments, and then they give us guidelines as to the rules to respect in order to run those experiments. We've seen this a lot of at larger organizations. Of course, just this is common sense. Understand the ethical and legal bandwidth of the company. So like companies have a different bandwidth, ethical bandwidth. Some of them, they want to grow at all costs. They don't really care what it takes. They'll go gray hat, sometimes black hat. Other companies, they need to protect the brand, protect the consumer. They want to be much more white hat. Understand what kind of organization you're in, how far can you actually go. In some cases, it's like for your first experiments, just go under the radar, be that entrepreneur that goes under the radar. I've heard this a lot. Work on your personal computer in the evening, not on your company computer, and get those wins. And then most of the time, you don't really get in trouble. In the cases that I've seen, you actually get praise, like thanks for the system override, we needed this, and now you can evangelize this experiment that's run, and maybe we can integrate it within the business. It really depends on your personality. This one, use your own credit card. If procurement is being a blocker, I've maxed out so many credit cards at larger companies, even at smaller companies, personal credit cards, because we couldn't have access to a credit card, it was too difficult. And then finally, if possible, position yourself outside or on the edges of the mothership. This is for small and medium-sized organizations. By the way, when I refer to corporates, I'm also referring to SMEs. We see the same sort of blockers in SMEs as in corporates. If possible, position yourself outside or on the edges of the mothership. We've worked a lot with sort of innovation projects. These ones are really difficult when the project is completely within the immune system of the mothership. These ones are interesting. It makes it a little bit easier. These are my favorite. When it's a separate LTD, a separate limited liability company, or a separate BV, and they can work with separate rules, but they still get the funding from the mothership, then it's a lot faster to experiment. You have a lot more freedom, let's say. Easier said than done, by the way. And then finally, the hurdles: C-level mindset, big egos, execution skills, agencies, and missing data. You know, educate them. The C-levels, send them to our courses. I'm not just saying this for sales, or send them to our videos on YouTube. Bring them into our courses. Just show them the right types of content, showing them that there is actually a pain. There is actually a huge ROI of running experiments rapidly, of de-risking ideas that we have. Try to get wins early. Do your quantitative and qualitative homework as well as possible to come up with the right experiments to run. Build up skills to be more self-sufficient so that you can run experiments yourself. Rick, that use case from Eneco, for example, he ran a lot of it on his own. Max from Mr. Green, he built the whole experiment on his own. Use agencies correctly. I would say you should de-risk assumptions, and then once you've proven that something works, you can give the playbook to the agency so that the agency runs the playbook. Don't let agencies own your tone of voice and own your thinking and own your experimentation. Use them to actually execute the experiments that you want to run. Don't let agencies hold all the raw data. Ask for the data, ask for the raw files of the data, not just pretty PDF reports. And then be prepared to spend time and money on data and tracking. This will take time. Usually it's IT time or data analyst time. That's why I try to get those stakeholders involved as early as possible. Getting tracking is complicated, getting it correct, and it requires maintenance. So try to focus on that as early as possible, or else you won't be able to understand whether your experiment was a win or not. Usually you'll run your first experiments and you'll find out that, yeah, you weren't tracking things correctly, and then you'll make the time investment to actually be able to track correctly. Cool. I'm going to go a little bit fast on the people because, I'm running out of time a little bit. This is your first growth hire. We like to call him the growth PM. We used to call him the growth hacker, but that gets a bad name within an organization because people think you're a magician. So now we like to call it the growth product manager. Usually somebody who's data oriented, if possible, some former growth experience. If not, get them trained up. Former head of growth. Having said that, really hard to find these at the moment. I think there's a 9-to-1 ratio of jobs for heads of growth versus people who are actually capable of doing the job. We know because we've been hiring some. And then, if possible, a former startup founder or a former entrepreneur that's willing to come and work on your project. This is what they look like. We have a whole video about this. It's called How to Be a T-Shaped Marketeer, How to Be a T-Shaped Player. And it's really having a deep understanding of some subjects and then a lighter understanding of other subjects, but at least an intuitive understanding of these subjects. So for example, this year we added machine learning and AI. It doesn't mean I want you to be an expert data scientist, but I do want you to be curious about it to understand what are the applications of machine learning in growth. What's the difference between supervised, unsupervised, and what can I do with it? Understanding how to play around with APIs and how automation works. And then an even deeper understanding of all of these different subject areas here. We try to update this T-shaped player every single year. Go check out the video. It's called How to Be a T-Shaped Marketeer on YouTube, and it's the 2018 version. We're currently working on the 2019 version. I won't tell you yet what we're going to add in the 2019 version, but there's some new skills that people need to start working on. Another one we added this year is this one, stakeholder management. We can't stress enough the power of soft skills when trying to implement a new function within an organization or a new way of working. Generic growth team looks like this. You have your growth PM, so your growth product manager, loves product and marketing. Your growth engineer likes fast iteration, doesn't mind building fast, fix later. 80% of the code will be thrown out, really into prototyping. And the most important is here, thinks in terms of minimal viable experiments, minimal viable product. Somebody who really likes to use existing frameworks, doesn't want to rebuild everything from scratch. Growth designer, huge customer empathy, understands the customer, can build beautiful, delightful experiences for the customer, and can prototype really fast. And then finally, the growth analyst, who can play around with small and large data sets. Not all of you have these resources on hand available, so maybe all of these are embodied within the same person, but then you need to be a lot of different people within, So what I'm saying here is that basically it's possible for one person to be sort of a half-assed version of all of these, and that's okay. And once you can start having extra resources, try to bring them in. I think the most expensive ones here are actually usually the growth designer and the growth analyst. Growth engineers, we found a little bit less scarce. You can usually get 2-3 days of sprint planning of a developer, basically, if your C-levels are on board. Oh, I don't know why that one was here. Yeah, if you cannot hire, if you need to train people up, we really believe it's hard to find these people. We can train people on the right mindset, on the tools and the tactics. That's why we started this company. We found that the talent actually lies within the organization. You actually already have the talent within your company, but it's more about training them up, and which is why we've built multiple sort of courses to train people into growth experts. There's the demystification courses, sort of the driver's license courses, which is a 2-day crash course. But there's also the longer 6-week evening courses where we take you and this individual and their project, we hold their hand and sort of run them through the whole process of what are the tactics, what is the process, what is the mindset, how you can implement this within the organization. Because it's just really difficult to hire all of these profiles. If it was easy, we wouldn't need to train so much. And we do this in a way that's called speed learning. We know you're busy, so we teach you in a really fast way. Cool. So this is generic growth team. We've seen many, many more types of growth team. Luke Montgomery is one of our head speakers here at Growth Tribe and head trainers. He's actually working on a whole video of what type of growth team you should start with. If you're a B2B company, you probably want to add sales inside that growth team. Maybe not full-time, maybe 1, 2, 3 days a week, or at least involve them in all of the experiments because they understand the customer, and usually try to take somebody who loves tools and automation. If you're more of a retention growth team, so for example, B2C to B SaaS or B2C e-commerce, we usually see that you need a little bit more growth engineers because you're deeper inside the product, retention inside the funnel, retention is deeper inside the customer journey, so it's much more product oriented. And usually you need, this should say data analyst, a few more data analysts or data scientists because there's more data to play around with. Data analyst. So what I'm saying is it's not a cookie cutter approach. It really depends on the scenario. Don't just try to build that generic growth team that I showed you earlier. Try to build the team that's right for you. Here for short sales cycles, or for example, if you're running e-commerce, usually it's a growth PM with an engineer to make changes on the front end, a designer that understands UX on the front end, and then an analyst that can sort of read significance of experiments and understand the statistics behind A/B testing. Cool. I'm not going to jump into org chart now. I knew I wouldn't have time for this. There's different ways to embed growth within the organization. There's many different models. I'm actually not going to jump into it. We might cover this in a future webinar. We do cover it in our courses. I think, but it takes like a lot of time to go into the nitty-gritty and the details. The only thing I'll say is that if you're starting right now, maybe just start with that one person and that one team that positions herself or himself as the experimentation agency within the organization. I'm here to run experiments on where we're bleeding money on the important metrics, and I'm here to help you run these experiments, sort of like an internal agency. We've seen that works really well to get other stakeholders on board. So we won't run through this stuff. So only thing I can say is this: stay curious. There's a growing digital skills gap. Technology is growing exponentially. It turns out once you hit the workforce, your skills sometimes grow logarithmically unless you really have that growth mindset and you have time outside of your job to work on these skills. This is why we started this company, to help bridge this gap, to make these organizations and these people grow faster. And there's so much stuff coming on a regular basis. We're even having trouble keeping up, and it's our job to keep up with this. So try to keep that growth mindset as much as possible, and to really identify what are the skills that you should be working on. If you're interested in taking this to the next level, check out our websites, check out some of the trainings that we do. We get a 9.5 out of 10 average rating on our trainings. We train about 350 people, 350 to 400 people per month at the moment. We're training in London, in the Netherlands. We're currently opening up Sweden, Norway, Finland, the Nordics, and then we'll go to Germany. I think it's really the time for people to keep upskilling themselves and to work with this. We're really trying to evangelize this experimentation way of working, which we're absolutely in love with. Yeah. So once again, this is not, if you're interested in this stuff, maybe just book a call with Timon or with Sabine at this URL over here, grow.ac/call, to see if it's a fit for your organization. Just 5-6 questions to find out, can this work where you're working at? Whether it depends on the size of the company, it depends sort of how the company is built, how many experiments you're currently running, and also the sales cycle of the product. How long does it take to actually sell this product? Is it a physical product? Is it a digital product? So this is a link to like Sabine and Timon's Calendly, where you can book a 15 or I think it's 20-minute call, something like this. Cool. Because it's not the case. We used to think we could put this everywhere. Actually, it's not in every single organization. Nice. Now we can do some questions. Do you have a template of the growth playbook we could use? Good question. Maybe we'll share this one. I don't know if we're sharing it. Yeah.
Maybe in the future.
Yeah, we'll make it a nice little viral post on LinkedIn, and the incentive will be the growth the playbook. That's a good point. Really good point. Okay, we'll share this one. Not right now. But but it's Vlad. We can share it with Vlad. What else do we have? Content marketing is a valuable channel since it leads to boost in SEO plus more frequent content. Completely agree. But it isn't really a fast win. Do you know any hacks, smaller experiments that you can run, see if content marketing is worth it or not? Yeah, so we've done this in the past. So I agree, SEO, content marketing is a marathon. There's a really sort of traditional way of doing this. Some people disagree with this one, but I really like it. And it's basically testing it with paid ads. So if you want to know if a keyword is worth it or if you're going to get traction or conversions for it, you would try to pay to rank for that keyword, drive some traffic from that paid keyword. So basically you pay for the keyword and people go to your landing page, whatever it is, and you see if there's conversions. You're de-risking whether that's an effective keyword to actually drive conversions. I would say my favorite at the moment is YouTube. It's really easy to rank for keywords on YouTube at the moment because there's not that much competition, because not that many people are actually creating good video content. The sort of hurdle to creating video content is not as big as we think it is. It's actually a lot simpler than you would think it is. It's just a little bit about having the bravery to actually to do it. And it's a great way of testing which keywords are getting traction, which keywords are getting a lot of comments. So we actually do this. We push videos. Some of the videos we've pushed, we've actually gotten rid of them because the traction wasn't big enough. Once we've de-risked certain keywords, like so let me give you an example. We did this for Digital Skills Gap. We thought, are people interested in the Digital Skills Gap, and does it drive qualified traffic to our website? So we actually made a video around it. We started, we put it on YouTube. We optimized the SEO. We started to get traction, and then we started to get a lot of comments, and then we started to get a lot of engagement, and then we started to get people clicking on that specific UTM, coming to our product, and actually buying courses. So then we said, okay, this is probably worth trying to rank on a normal, on a organic. I'm losing my words, on Google for. So now we're building what's called a pillar page, a pillar content, which is a huge piece of content around the Digital Skills Gap so that we can rank on Google search for it. So you can run some small de-risking experiments for content marketing to see if it's worth it. Yeah, I hope that sort of answers, those are the two that I can think of right now that, that we've actually done. If you've got any other ideas, Neil, please go ahead and share them. Can we download the Backlog Ideas experiment app? Sorry, unfortunately, we only share that with the course attendees. We're thinking of maybe making a business model out of it, so like a freemium software where we would share it. But like right now, the financials don't work because we would, yeah. So it's one of our H2 innovations. It's Horizon 2 innovations, like a new product we're working on. Just to maintain a free app would require quite some developers and some customer care. I don't know if we have the time or the bandwidth to do this at the moment. So unfortunately, we don't share this at the moment. However, if you watch my YouTube video on the Grows process, maybe you can actually create a similar sort of spreadsheet for yourself. Can we get one growth playbook as a sample? Okay, well, see, this was an experiment and there's a lot of requests for it. So we're definitely gonna build something for you guys around this. If there's a big desire for it, we'll I think we'll build like a viral post and then we'll share it with the community. You must-have read book, blog, website tips. Ouch. Yeah, read anything by Guillaume Cabane at the moment. Guillaume Cabane, he was head of growth at Drift, and no, he was head of growth at Segment, and now he's head of growth at Drift. And watch our growth insights. Sorry to be like touting my sort of, you know, promoting our own content again, but check out Growth Insights. It's a series we do on YouTube. I pick the brain of everybody within our company on the top tools, tactics, and processes that they've been using for the past weeks. What have they been reading? What have they been testing? And and then we share that in a very fast video on YouTube. We try to do it once every 2-3 weeks. Now it's once every 4 weeks because we were just busy with hiring. I'm trying to get it back to once every 2 weeks. And then one last thing, I think the last great book I read that I would really recommend. Oh fuck, I'm blanking on it now. Oops. Let me think a little bit. What's something we read that was really good recently? I've been reading a lot of behavioral psychology stuff, so it's not really super relevant. It is quite relevant, but our favorite book is Lean Analytics. I mean, that's the #1 that we recommend to everyone. Lean Analytics, it's sort of an introduction to being data-driven, but I've been recommending this for 2 years now. I need to start recommending something else. Yeah. And then anything by Dan Ariely, anything by Daniel Kahneman for the behavioral psychology side. Sean Ellis's Hacking Growth is also good. Or just don't read books. No, I shouldn't say this because I read a lot of them. But get Blinkist. It's like an app and allows you to listen to books for like 7-8 minutes and see if it's interesting, and then start reading the whole book if it's interesting. Blinkist, Blinkist. Do you have the same Failboard in Amsterdam as in London, or do the offices run separate experiments? Oh, that's a really good question. So we used to have a virtual board, and now it's physical board. So actually, it's different boards, different countries, different boards. We might do a virtual board. By the way, it's beautiful to have it physically, not virtually, because it's a real conversation starter. Like, oh, what are you guys about? It's an amazing conversation starter for stakeholders to start talking about. Cool. Thanks a lot, and see you guys soon. Bye.